Welcome to the Mission First People Always podcast. We're glad you're here. And now our host, Dr. Mike Patterson.
It's Dr. Mike Patterson, your host of the Mission First People Always podcast, where we talk about what it takes to be a great leader and how to build a great team. I'm glad you're here. And if you like what you hear on today's episode or any of our past episodes, please give us a review and hit follow or subscribe on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast. And it will help others find us as well. Now, I'm excited about today's episode and our guest because it's personal for me. I also think it's going to hit home for many of our listeners, especially those who are well along in their career journey, as well as some mid-career or even early career folks. One of the terms I found myself using more and more over the last couple of years is seasons of life. I like the phrase as an appropriate description of the different parts of life we all experience. And perhaps it's all the more meaningful to me now because I'm looking back and recognizing many of these transition points in my own life. I'm going to generalize a bit and likely not describe the unique situations of some, but here's how it generally works. We all begin as children. We grow up. We're influenced by our parents, family members, or other caregivers. We learn, we mature physically, we have dreams and aspirations, or we just have fun. And before we know it, we're young adults. We begin doing life on our terms. For some, it begins with college and living apart from our parents for the first time. For others, it's the military, and for others, it's work and the independence that employment and a biweekly paycheck brings. For many, it's a time of fun and freedom, building relationships, and looking ahead toward all the possibilities that the future holds. But for many, we eventually find that special someone, settle down, or at least begin focusing more intently on our careers and professional lives. This is the season where some of us have children, buy homes, take on more responsibilities, seek to build wealth, and develop stability. This season can last 20 or 30 or more years. And then you wake up, and I'm going to speak from experience here, and you're in your 50s. You've attended your last child's college graduation, and in my case, grad school graduation, and you begin thinking about the next season of life. It's the next season, the one that some long for, dream about, and others dread. That's the season of retirement, and that's what we're going to talk about on today's episode. But we're not going to talk about personal finance and when to take Social Security and the ins and outs of Medicare and all of that stuff that other podcasts dedicate themselves to. Rather, we're going to talk about how to create a retirement that's filled with meaning and purpose. How to make the retirement season, which for some of us, hopefully many of us, can last 20, 30, even 40 years, the most rewarding season of your life. On today's episode, we're talking about what it takes to lead yourself well into retirement and how to make that season of life filled with meaning and purpose.
Welcome to the Mission First People Always podcast, where we talk about better business results, stronger teams, more successful careers, and happier lives. Along the way, we hope to bust some biases, build some bridges, and have some fun. We're glad you're here. And now, our host, Dr. Mike Patterson.
On today's episode, we're talking about what it takes to lead yourself well in retirement and how to make that season of life one that's filled with meaning and purpose and contentment. And I've got a great guest today. It's Sheryl Roy, and I've known Sheryl for, I think it's about 10 years. Yeah. First, she was my client when she was an organizational effectiveness leader at ExxonMobil in Houston. Then we co-presented at the Association of Talent Development Conference, and now she is a friend. And I've always respected Sheryl because she's always been a person who gets it. She's sharp. She knows how to drive business results while also taking care of people. And that's always my message. And that's the message of Mission First People Always. So I think she's a perfect guest here. Now, Sheryl is retired, and that's why she's a perfect guest for today. Woohoo. She's a leadership and transition coach, bringing her expertise in organizational effectiveness and that passion for diversity and inclusion that she has had for her entire career, bringing that experience, her experience of transitioning out of a 31 career, beginning as an engineer and then project management, and finally moving into the human capital space at ExxonMobil for the last 10 plus years. She's been mentoring and developing people around the globe. And now she's doing that more on a personal one-on-one basis. Just real quick, she's a graduate. She's a Texas person, a daughter of Texas, proud daughter of Texas. She went to UT Austin, is a mechanical engineer by training. Lots of additional training, including a Rice University leadership coaching certification. She's certified in a whole bunch of psychometric tools and programs. And she's just also a really great facilitator. I can speak to that from experience. She's in Houston. She shares retirement with her husband of 30 plus years. And she's into art. She's into running. She's into a lot of cool stuff. Let's hear from her. Stop listening to me. Sheryl, it's great to have you on the Mission First People Always podcast. Welcome.
Thank you. Wow, what an intro. It is so great to be here talking with you today, Mike.
You know, we've just been chatting, catching up for a little bit before we turned on the recording here. And you just are having a great experience in the early days of retirement. And I think that's because you plan for it. You had a plan, you're working your plan, you're living out what you have dreamed for years. And so let's begin with just a basic question to launch our conversation. Why is it so important to transition into retirement well? Why should this be an important topic of discussion for people, you know, years before they start they move into retirement potentially? What do you think?
Yeah. Well, you know, it's interesting when you think about our bookends of life. You know, when we think about one of the bookends, you know, we kick off our kindergarten, you know, careers so early in life, and we go through this very ordered structure, you know, going through school, through high school, through college and university, hopping into whatever careers we might have at all the various companies that we might work. And when you think about that span and coming to the very other end of the bookend, which is retirement, it has been the majority of our life of having order and structure and chaos and so on and so forth. And, you know, when I think about, you know, even ExxonMobil, when we have, you know, big change management projects, we really spend a significant amount of time on planning for that change and planning for the personal transition that each of the individuals who are going to live out that project or that change, how important it is to, you know, ensure that they're ready for that transition. And the project will be a failure if we don't do that. And it's very much so similar. We need to kind of think about our lives as the importance of having change plans for approaching this very, you know, critical milestone and bookend, you know, of our lives as we get into retirement. And we spend that amount of time ensuring we have financial stability and good health and so on and so forth. But I don't think very many people think about the deep emotional transition that's going on as we approach retirement.
I think you're right. And an example of this came up during a conversation I was having a few weeks ago at dinner with a friend. We were hanging out. He was fairly recently retired in his mid-50s. He's a successful and talented guy. He had a long and fruitful career. He was a leader who managed people probably for 25 years of his career. Financially, he was in a good place. But when I asked him how it was going and whether there was anything he missed about work, he he didn't really hesitate to say this. He said, I'm generally doing well in retirement, but I really miss being needed on a
Mhm.
daily basis. I miss my people. What
Right.
would you say to my friend?
Right. Well, I often talk about, first, for me to be talking on a topic of retirement, and I literally just retirement, could just retired could be really funny. But for me, I've been coaching for many years and really got into deeper sense of urgency of planning for retirement, and even in a different way, really through some of that coaching. It was really, talking to folks who had lots of excitement about the retirement that was coming up, but a lot of trepidation. And doing the myriad of research, I really saw a lot of discussion around different phases of retirement that people go through. And so what I do is I like to simplify things. So if I were to summarize, I think everyone sort of enters retirement in sort of three phases. And I really have a sense that, your friend was, entering into kind of what I almost think of as the second phase. So the first phase is easy, and I am so deep into it, and that is the vacation and the honeymoon phase. I mean, after leaving those bookends of structure and order, you are entering a sense of freedom and, more autonomy and choice and ability to have more rest and sleep and travel and do things you enjoy. And, in that kind of phase, I think most people feel it, and it really is a variation in terms of how people enter retirement, but that may fade quickly or maybe even transition into what I think of as phase two. And it sounds a bit more of what your friend was experiencing. And that is that sense of loss. It really is reconciling loss. And we talked about change management and planning for that change. This is a bit where people start to experience that Kubler-Ross change curve, where suddenly everything's going great, and all of a sudden you have that sense of loss, and the curve starts to go down. But when you think about all those years of working, there's several areas of loss that people feel, and that routine and structure that people were familiar with, whether it was time of going to work and coming home and things outside, or doing lunch and all of that routine. When you hop into retirement, if you aren't creating another sense of structure, there definitely can feel a loss there. What your friend was really mentioning, networks, connections, and relationships. I mean, that is so that's important for everyone. But definitely, once you leave work and enter retirement, there is a whole swath of networks that are gone and connections that are broken. And, it's funny when you think about LinkedIn and all the folks posting about, resignations and moving on to other opportunities. The common thing and the string is that the missing the people, the missing the relationships, and those connections. So that's definitely something that it sounds like he was experiencing as well.
So Sheryl, let me jump in and ask you, I like what you said about the vacation honeymoon phase. That sounds like great fun. More rest and sleep, freedom, travel, time for hobbies. I love that.
Yeah.
But should we try to extend it? Is that realistic? Can you live on vacation for years at a time? Is that right for everyone? Tell us more about that experience.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that it almost, when I think about phase one, phase two, they really do overlap. So, I mean, even for myself, I am deep in the vacation honeymoon mode, but there's no doubt that there's things that I'm missing, or I have a sense of a loss. So I would say that everyone will experience some loss. It really just comes back to some of the planning and reflection and really thinking about that transition for what's really important for you in terms of what you experienced before retirement, and what you want to transition into, being able to incorporate that. So even when I say vacation and honeymoon, I mean, I do know folks that have, sold their home, bought a motor home, and they are living their lives traveling, around the world. Even those people are shifting into things that are more deeply meaningful and purposeful, and filling in some of these areas of loss, that they've had. So, whether it was routine and structure, it is still looking to, create some of that. Whether it is, the networks, connections, and relationships, it's finding new communities to build some of that up. And, some of the other areas, like I think one of the loss that people feel also is kind of this identity, or even power, because we all had certain roles and job titles, and, we may have been the go-to person or an expert. I mean, now you're in retirement, there's a sense of, and I've heard someone say this, I feel like I'm just another person on the street. Like people aren't coming to me for this level of expertise the way that
right.
I was working. Those are important.
So it seems like it's coming down to this real need for a sense of meaning and purpose.
Right.
For many of us, our careers gave us that. We had a mission to accomplish every day. And if that mission was meaningful to us, it engaged us. And many of us, and hopefully all of my listeners, are thriving in their professional lives. But then we don't have that professional life anymore in retirement. We still need meaning and purpose. How do you develop that when there's not that professional outlet anymore?
Yeah. I mean, that really is kind of linking to the next phase. So when I think about the 3 phases and this honeymoon, and then just dealing with this loss, I think the next critical phase is really discovering, your meaning and purpose. Again, it comes back to, as I was retiring and announcing to, other folks that I was retiring, the number one question is, what will you do in retirement? And, even as I reflect on, the fact that I'd be retiring at 55, and I plan to live at least another 45 years. So I have, almost half of my life left. So there is no do in retirement. So I kind of go back to when I'm coaching others, I often ask them to view their lives in, 3 to 5 increments, 3 to 5 year increments, so that it's not so big and looming of what they want to do in the future. It's something right here in front of them. And one of the books I've read, and I leverage his concept, Michael Bungay-Stander wrote a book, How to Begin, start doing something that matters. And in there, he talks about, really setting big, worthy goals in areas of your life. And I think this is important when you're in phase 3, is to really think about, what's your next big, worthy goal. And he sets 3 criteria for these big, worthy goals. It has to be thrilling, really lights you up, gets you excited, speaks to your values. It's something you care about. It also has to be important. So it gives you, more to the world than it takes. It really is about not doing it for you personally, but doing it for others, really worthy of your time. And then the final one, which I absolutely love, because it's not about, it's thrilling, you love it, it's important. And the third one is not that you're good at it. The third one is that it's daunting. So it challenges you. It really makes you delve down deep into your core. What's your unlimited power? What are your creative abilities? And really stretches you beyond your, the boundaries of your current capabilities, knowledge, and resources. So even in retirement, we tend to think about that development and stretching in our careers, but it's just as important as you get into retirement to now think about not just doing something meaningful and purposeful, but how do you really get in and do it thrilling, important, but even daunting? And I think that that's something that, and when you think about work, it's very difficult to find time to do daunting outside of work. But you're now retired and you have choice and opportunity to really get into areas that you may not have been able to get into while you were working.
Yeah, and I really like what you said about thinking in terms of 3 to 5 year increments.
Yeah.
In the business world, we often do 3-year plans. We've all been interviewed, and some interviewer would say, "Where do you want to be in 5 years?" So we should continue asking those questions in retirement. But I have to ask, I've got several things come to mind here based on what you just said, but the first thing is daunting. Daunting sounds like I need to climb mountains and then jump off of them with a parachute. Is that necessarily what daunting means? That's my first question. And then second question is, how do we develop these goals and identify what's important and daunting to us? How do we do it? If I'm listening to the podcast today, where do I start? What do I do?
Yeah, I'd say when we talk about daunting, one, when you get back into understanding what people value and what's thrilling and so on and so forth and important, there's a whole variety of daunting type things. And for me, it is not focusing on what you're good at, but what is something out there broader looming that you want to do. So, I mean, just some of the examples, it might be, joining a board, publishing a book, kicking off a business or side business, returning to school for a new degree or getting a certification in something. I mean, even for you, it was beginning a podcast. I mean, I'm sure that wasn't just a walk in the park. And,
you mean I'm not making it sound like it's easy?
You make it sound like it's effortless, but I mean, I have no doubt that that was definitely some daunting going on there. And, even for me, I, jumped into art a couple of years ago and I love oil pastels and doing some abstract. For me, it's not just about pursuing my art, but my big worthy goal is to, eventually have a small business in art and, have a art exhibit somewhere in my future. That makes it pretty big and daunting for me. I can easily just create art, and I've done a bunch of commission pieces already, but it's really a thrill of bringing it to the next level that does keep me excited each and every day. I don't have all the answers right now, but it really drives me and energizes and motivates me much more than just, doing art itself.
Yeah. I can relate to that, Sheryl. My daunting goal, daunting task here in this season of life for me is helping a young pastor plant a church here in our town. And we are starting from scratch, gathering people, figuring it out every day, new challenges, building relationships. And it is daunting at times. It's fulfilling. It's meaningful. It gives me purpose. And it's exciting to think about what we can build over time, over the next 10 years. I think it was Bill Gates who said, we tend to underestimate what we can create in the next year. Yeah. I'm sorry, we tend to overestimate what we can create in the next year, but we underestimate what we can create in the next decade. And so I think as we begin retirement, maybe we should be thinking bigger about what we can create over the next decade.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, one of the things I found in some of the studies that I was doing that some of the links say something different, but between 60 and 80 retirees or even pre-retirees all plan to do some type of work, whether they're paid or it's volunteer, into their retirement years. So I look at that and think, wow, what opportunity we have to get a good portion of that 60 to 80% to not just transition into comfort lane. Easy to say, well, gosh, I've been doing this while working. I can just now go find something of that. But the first question would be, is that something that, gets you revved up? Is it thrilling? I mean, is it really important? Is it daunting? You have the opportunity and the freedom finally to have a choice of what your lane is going to be in retirement. How can you help create and build that path versus just go down a path that is the easy button, because it may not fulfill you for the remaining parts of your years.
Yeah, I think that word choice is key for me, and what makes the future exciting when we've given ourselves choices and when we put ourselves in the driver's seat to exercise those choices in healthy, positive, productive ways. I think that's exciting, and that's good. What are some considerations we should have in retirement? There's probably a very, very long list, and let's not talk about finances and money and when we should take Social Security and Medicare and all that stuff. That's for other experts on other podcasts. But what are some things that we should be thinking about as we look ahead to retirement?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one of the things that tools that we use in the coaching profession a lot is sort of what we call this wheel of life, and it really looks at different areas in your life and understanding what's going well, where you need to focus for improvement. And it's funny, I was reflecting and almost wanting to build this at one point. Was we can create a retirement wheel of life. It's almost like a whole system diagnosis, and doing this before you retired is even better. But if you can do this in retirement, where you're looking at all of these areas and saying, if I had to judge this on a scale of 1 to 5, 1, things aren't so good, and 5, they're just rocking it. How would you rate these? And so, some of the lists would be, in the categories of family and friends and, your love relationships and health and fitness and spirituality, joy in life, self-esteem, your money, investments, recreation, relaxation, professional development and growth, your contribution to society. Those are all really critical areas of our life. How would you rate those? And all of those areas that are low, how do you then prioritize where you put your focus so that you are growing the, numbers of 4s and 5s in all of those areas as you approach retirement, or knowing where you need to focus your area. Now, this is kind of a whole life assessment that you can do at any time. I'm talking someone on this call is 20 years old. Absolutely. Still critical, important. But boy, when you get to that bookend of life, these are things, it's almost like getting your, how do they say this? Getting all of your buckets and your ducats in line and whatever. It is really quite important to do it. And a lot of people do say, oh, well, when I retire, I'll have time to think about that. Oh, no. I mean, it's no different than saying, I'll worry about my finances when I retire. You thinking about all of these other critically important areas of your life is just as important as you working and focusing on your finance.
So what do you say, Sheryl, to somebody who maybe is in retirement 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years into retirement, and their scores on your evaluation there are not where they want them to be? They're twos and 3s on a scale of 5, and they'd like to get their retirement back on track in pursuit of that meaning, purpose, and richness that they had dreamed of for 30, 40 years of their working careers. What advice would you give them to get it back on track?
I mean, there's a variety of things. I mean, one, I would say, and this is really sort of the answer I didn't get to answer in terms of, how would someone develop goals, is I'd say, get help. We have a whole variety of different coaches. And, even for myself, I focus on transition coaching as well. I mean, we're able to really, help you slow down to then speed up, really have you help reflect and ask the right questions and, look across that sort of whole life assessment and, work with sort of encouraging self-discovery and your client generated type solutions to really help you move in the right direction and identify some of those big worthy goals and help hold you responsible and accountable in terms of you shifting towards those. So I mean, that's almost a no-brainer. When I think about the expertise that we seek when we're talking about building our financial stability, we need to really think about that same kind of expertise when we're talking about building our own personal resilience in terms of getting into retirement. So that's easily one that I'd recommend.
What's something practical? Let's think of, my listeners, my audience. If you're in your 30s, 40s, 50s, maybe early 60s, what are some things that you can do in different seasons of life or different decades of life that would prepare you for this healthy, positive retirement that we're all striving for?
Yeah, I mean, if you were to think about where you might be low in some of these areas, I mean, there's things that you can do, even early in life. We have so much, when you think about some of the loss that people have in terms of networks, connections, and relationships at work, really think about the balance that if you were to leave your job today, where would you have those connections? Where are your friendships? Where are your communities? And some of those are just, and some of these is just really the response you'd have if you're in retirement, and some of these areas are pretty missing as well. Like, what are your new networks and communities? How do you change your social circles or reconnect with family and friends that you may not have connected with? How do you build some of those? But even in terms of some of the kind of purpose and meaning, there are other ways that you can connect, whether you're mentoring or tutoring others or joining a class and a course to kind of get to know others, but also having self-development or volunteering or joining book clubs. There's a variety of things that might fulfill some of those areas of loss that you might feel. But when you think about that whole system wheel, I think you're able to really kind of close and address and work some of those things even earlier on, no different than you can later. The other thing I'd say too is the practicality of you slowing down and really assessing all those areas and seeing an area that might be low can give you much more ability to go off and do self-learning and self-research in many of these areas, with help or without help. I think sometimes we're running so fast and there's so much noise and we're running from here to there that we really don't slow down to really assess how things are going and what areas might be going well and not well. It's just, some things just can't be addressed if we don't really slow down and identify, the areas that we need to focus on in the base case. It is a lot easier if you're saying, here's the area, and also to reach out to the right person to help support you in some of those areas.
Yeah, I think you're right. In so many areas of life, hurry gets us in trouble. We can't relate to others well when we're in a hurry. We can't love our spouses well when we're always in a hurry. We can't do a good job on the projects that are in front of us when we're always in a hurry. And we can't plan for the next 20, 30 years of our life when we're in a hurry. So maybe it does come down to slowing down, investing in relationships. And it seems to always come down to relationships on this podcast. And, everything we talk about seems to always land on people are really important in our lives. And we can't ever discount their importance. So Sheryl, it sounds like you are off to a great start in your retirement, but you're willing to help take some of your time to help other people get off to a great start in their retirement. You're doing some coaching.
Yes.
You told me that you don't want to be consumed with coaching, but you're open to taking a few more selective clients. So if somebody has heard you today and sort of relate to you and where you are and your point of view and would like to connect with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
I'd say two ways. I mean, absolutely, we can connect on LinkedIn and kind of start a conversation there. And you can also email me directly at coach@SherylRoy.com. And so we'll leave some of these links, I'm sure, in the show notes. But I'd say those are sort of the two main ways. And I would love to connect and have a conversation. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's great. And we will put all of Sheryl's contact information in the show notes. It is Sheryl with an S, SHERYL, Roy, ROY. So we've covered a lot of ground, Sheryl. I think it has been a great conversation. It has been a wonderful experience to reconnect with you. And I just am grateful that you were a wonderful guest on the Mission First People Always podcast.
Oh, absolutely. It's been a pleasure.
Well, to my listeners, we are always talking about the ways in which we can make a positive dent in the world. Sometimes that positive dent is in the workplace, about driving performance, about building teams. Today, it's about a positive dent in the world, maybe after you've concluded your time in the workplace, a life of meaning and purpose beyond doing something for an organization. It's doing something for community, for your family, for you in big, daunting, thrilling ways. And so please consider what you've heard today. Until next time. Oh, and by the way, if you like what you heard today, subscribe, follow, review so other people can find us. And until next time, be a great leader, build a great team. God bless you all.
Thanks for listening. We hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you want to create a stronger, more people-centric and empowered culture for your organization, visit drmikepatterson.com.